Welcome back. Today's topic is all about nicotine. Nicotine is a highly addictive drug, although it is a legal one, just like alcohol. It can be found in tobacco and e-cigarettes, so in this lecture we will be covering both of those substances. Nicotine is a stimulant drug. That is the classification of drug that it falls into. And the reason it is classified as a stimulant is because it speeds up the body and central nervous system. It actually has the opposite effect of what alcohol does, which is a depressant and slows everything down. Nicotine speeds everything up. So some of the effects that it will have on the body include elevating heart rate and blood pressure. So our blood is flowing through our veins faster because our heart is pumping faster. It constricts our blood vessels, so the space that our blood travels through our body is smaller. And it also irritates lung tissue and diminishes our ability to taste and smell. As I said before, nicotine is a very addicting drug, meaning that a user is much more motivated to use it when its effects wear off. So when that high goes away, the user is motivated to use it again and again because that high felt really good to them. One form nicotine comes in is tobacco. Tobacco comes from the dried out leaves of the tobacco plant. The plant naturally contains nicotine. The psychoactive ingredient in the tobacco plant is nicotine, which is that stimulant drug, but there are also more than 4,000 other chemicals, 2,000 of which are known to be poisonous, that are present in cigarettes. Tobacco is used in many different forms, including cigars, cigarettes, and chewing tobacco. One of the most popular forms of tobacco use is through cigarettes. There are two main ingredients that are in a cigarette. Nicotine is one, which is that stimulant drug that speeds up the body and central nervous system. Nicotine is absorbed immediately by the lungs and can reach the brain in as little as 10 seconds. This is the same for people who use smokeless tobacco, as it's put into the mouth and is absorbed into the bloodstream quickly as well. Nicotine is also a very addictive drug. Studies have shown that it is as addictive as heroin, cocaine, and alcohol because it stimulates the same area of the brain. When the pick-me-up effect of nicotine wears off, a user is motivated to use more tobacco and acts on the areas of the brain that control feelings of pleasure. People who regularly use tobacco develop a tolerance to nicotine, meaning they need more and more to produce a desired effect. The other component of a cigarette is tar, and tar is a thick, sticky, dark fluid that's produced when tobacco burns. Tar damages a smoker's respiratory system by paralyzing and destroying cilia, which are those tiny hair-like structures that line the upper airways and protect the body against infection. It also destroys the alveoli, or air sacs, which absorb oxygen and rid the body of carbon dioxide. Lung tissue is also damaged, reducing lung function, making smokers susceptible to diseases like bronchitis, pneumonia, emphysema, heart disease, and cancer. Tar is a carcinogen, meaning it is a cancer-causing agent or contains chemicals that cause cancer. They also contain other carcinogens that are often found in paint, rat poison, and toilet cleaner. Lastly, we know cigarettes contain over 4,000 chemicals, including carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is one we have to look out for because it absorbs more quickly and deprives the body's tissues and cells of oxygen. It also increases the risk of developing high blood pressure, heart disease, hardening of the arteries, and other circulatory problems. Smokeless tobacco is tobacco that can be sniffed through the nose, held in the mouth, or chewed. Chew, which is in that picture on the far left, are the loose leaves, plugs, or twists of rope that are placed between the cheek and the lower lip. Snuff, which can be seen on the far right, is a finely cut or powdered tobacco. The nicotine is absorbed quickly into the bloodstream through the mucous lining of the mouth, making it highly addicting. Some people think that smokeless tobacco is a better alternative to cigarettes because it doesn't contain so many chemicals, but the harmful chemicals in smokeless tobacco are absorbed into the body at levels up to 3 times the amount of a single cigarette. If you think about it, it takes a person on average about 11 minutes to smoke a single cigarette. However, a person might have chew in their mouth for up to 3 times longer than that. So the exposure to the harmful chemicals lasts longer than that of a cigarette. As a result of that exposure, smokeless tobacco causes cancer of the mouth, throat, larynx, esophagus, stomach, and pancreas. Vaping is another mode of transmission for using nicotine. Vaping is inhaling and exhaling the aerosol, often referred to as a vapor, that's produced by an e-cigarette or similar device. E-cigarettes come in many shapes and sizes. Most have a battery, a heating element, and a place to hold a liquid. E-cigarettes produce an aerosol by heating a liquid that usually contains nicotine, flavorings, and other chemicals that help make the aerosol. Users inhale the aerosol into their lungs, and bystanders can also breathe in this aerosol when the user exhales it into the air. E-cigarettes are known by many different names: e-cigs, e-hookahs, mods, vape pens, vapes, tank systems, pods, and ENDS, or electronic nicotine delivery systems, are all names that we refer to e-cigarettes by. Some devices are made to look like regular cigarettes, cigars, or pipes. Others resemble pens, USB sticks, and other everyday items. And larger devices such as the tank systems or mods do not resemble any other tobacco product we've seen before. E-cigarettes are also used to deliver marijuana and other drugs. As you may have heard, the use of e-cigarettes is on the rise. Juul, one brand of e-cigarette, is the most popular brand used by teens. So why is Juul so popular? It is purposely designed to look like a tech product similar to that of an Apple device. It comes in flavors, is fairly inexpensive compared to some other e-cigarette devices, it's small and discreet, and it doesn't smell like cigarettes. All of these factors appeal to youth, making Juul so much more popular than any other e-cigarette brand. So what? Juul is just flavors, right? That is false. One Juul pod contains the same amount of nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes, and studies are showing that many teens don't even know there is nicotine in their vape. In fact, the e-cigarette industry is not regulated in the same way as the cigarette industry is. What that means for the consumer is some e-cigarette companies market some of their products as not containing nicotine. These products have been tested in an independent lab and have been shown to contain nicotine. So let's talk about some health risks that tobacco and e-cigarette use pose for the human body. In order to fully understand these health risks, we first have to explore how the brain communicates. The human brain is made up of billions of nerve cells. These nerve cells, called neurons, send messages at lightning-fast speeds in order to control our thoughts, emotions, behaviors, sensations, and movements. Neurons communicate with each other by sending messages to one another through the synaptic gap. The interesting thing about neurons is that they do not directly connect to each other. This means that they don't touch each other. Therefore, the messages they send to one another must be carried by chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. Essentially, this is like a boat carrying a message across a river. The neurotransmitters must carry a message across the synaptic gap in order for it to be passed on to the next neuron. The brain also contains a reward circuit which controls and regulates how we experience pleasure. When a behavior causes us to feel pleasure, we are likely to repeat that behavior. This reinforces the behaviors that are necessary to our survival, like eating food. If we get pleasure out of eating food, we are more likely to do it again. However, it can also reinforce negative behaviors that are harmful to our health, such as using drugs. Nicotine, as with other drugs, changes the way neurons communicate with each other. Nicotine mimics the structure of acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that carries messages related to respiration, heart rate, memory, alertness, and muscle movement across the synaptic gap. Nicotine actually stops acetylcholine from delivering those messages and, as a result, prevents what should normally happen. One way to think about nicotine is like termites coming into your home. Your home is a structure that is already built for you to live in. It has a specific purpose and function. Termites will come into the home and take advantage of this structure, which alters the original use for the house. It's important to understand how nicotine affects the brain because cigarettes, and most e-cigarettes, contain nicotine. In addition, we know nicotine has health effects. For example, nicotine is a highly addictive substance, it's toxic to developing fetuses, and it has huge consequences for brain development in teenagers. Short-term health effects as a result of using tobacco and vaping products that contain nicotine include increased blood pressure, an increased heart rate, an irregular heartbeat, and faster breathing. Over time, using tobacco products like cigarettes and smokeless tobacco can cause damage to many body systems and cause people to suffer from many health problems, such as cardiovascular disease. Nicotine raises the heart rate and blood pressure and constricts the blood vessels, forcing the heart to work harder. Cigarettes also produce carbon monoxide, which impedes oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Because carbon monoxide impairs circulation, cholesterol deposits increase. Cholesterol is that fatty substance that deposits on the inside walls of our arteries. You can see this in the picture at the top of the screen. If more cholesterol deposits along that artery wall, it makes the area for our blood to travel through smaller. Eventually, so much cholesterol could deposit on the artery walls that passageway is completely blocked. This increases the risk of a heart attack by 2 to 3 times and doubles a person's chances of suffering a stroke. An encouraging point is that the likelihood of a heart attack is significantly reduced following 1 year of tobacco cessation. There are also many respiratory diseases that are caused from long-term use of tobacco. 2 common respiratory conditions caused by smoking are chronic coughing, also known as smoker's cough, and shortness of breath. More serious conditions are chronic bronchitis and emphysema, which appear almost exclusively in smokers and are referred to as COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Chronic bronchitis occurs when the cilia of the bronchi tubes, which are the tubes that connect the windpipe to both lungs, become so damaged that they're useless. This leads to buildup of tar in the lungs, causing chronic coughing and excessive mucus secretion. Emphysema is a disease that destroys the tiny air sacs in the lungs. You can see those tiny air sacs in that bottom picture. It almost looks like a raspberry. And each of those air sacs is where oxygen is actually absorbed by the lungs into the bloodstream. What happens with emphysema is those air sacs become less elastic, making it difficult for the lungs to absorb oxygen. If you think about our lungs expanding and contracting, if those air sacs are less elastic, our lungs can't absorb as much oxygen because they can't expand enough. They lose their elasticity to do that. Sometimes the air will also get trapped in there, meaning that we can't contract as well. So, a person with advanced emphysema uses up to 80% of their daily energy supply just to breathe. If you think about it, that doesn't leave a lot of energy for much else. Tobacco also weakens our immune system, making the body more vulnerable to disease and a person more likely to get sick. We also know that there are over 40 gases in tobacco smoke that cause cancer. Some of the cancers that a smoker is at risk for include oral, pancreatic, esophageal, larynx, tracheal, kidney, and bladder cancer. But one of the most common cancers caused from tobacco use is lung cancer. Lung cancer almost always causes death, usually within 5 years of a person's diagnosis, and it's rare for someone who has never smoked to develop lung cancer. Lung cancer kills more people than any other cancer, and cigarette smoking is responsible for 30% of all cancer deaths and 87% of lung cancer deaths. Now, cigarettes have been around for a while, and people have been smoking for over 100 years. E-cigarettes are fairly new, so we don't have a lot of data on them in terms of the long-term effects because we haven't had enough time to collect that data. However, we do know some of the long-term health effects as a result of vaping. Besides nicotine, e-cigarette aerosols contain known carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals and tiny particles that reach deep into the lungs. These particles have been linked to cardiovascular disease, including the increased risk for heart attacks and serious lung diseases. E-cigarettes are still fairly new and scientists are still learning about their long-term effects. However, the data collected so far is not good. For example, recent studies have shown e-cigarettes to cause high levels of cancer-causing agents in the bloodstream, a lung irritation similar to that of a cigarette smoker, and an increase in circulatory problems. This means that our body cannot circulate our blood properly, which carries the nutrients our bodies need to function at an optimal level. Studies have also shown that vaping can cause a decrease in immune system function. Due to this decrease, our bodies cannot fight off bacteria or viruses like the common cold or the flu very well, and we are more likely to get sick. Lastly, vaping has been associated with causing a decrease in focus and attention span, as well as addiction. Besides health risks, e-cigarettes also pose other risks, including unintentional injuries. There have been several reports of defective batteries causing fires and explosions, some of which have resulted in serious injuries. In addition to e-cigarettes causing unintentional injuries and defective batteries causing fires and explosions, there have been reports of accidental ingestion of e-liquids by both children and adults. This leads to acute nicotine exposure and is toxic. Research is also starting to show that youth who use e-cigarettes are more likely to use combustible cigarettes and other tobacco products. So, the next time someone thinks about vaping, they should consider the consequences it has for their body. And if you've been connecting the dots, a lot of the same long-term effects that we're seeing as a result of vaping are also the effects that we've been seeing from long-term use of tobacco. Let's talk about secondhand smoke for a minute. A lit cigarette burns for about 12 minutes. During those 12 minutes, people who are near the smoker will breathe in secondhand smoke. There are actually two different types of secondhand smoke, mainstream smoke and side stream smoke. Mainstream smoke is the smoke that's exhaled from the lungs of a smoker. So after they take a drag on that cigarette, that smoke goes into their lungs, filters out some of those toxins, and then they breathe it out. Side stream smoke is the smoke that comes directly from the burning end of a lit cigar, pipe, or cigarette. But here's the biggest difference between these two types of secondhand smoke. When someone takes a drag on a cigarette, they inhale those toxins that go through a filter in the cigarette. So that filter is filtering out some of those toxins. When it goes into their lungs absorb some of those toxins so that by the time they blow it out, there are less toxins for a person inhaling secondhand smoke to breathe in. The smoke coming out of a lit end of a cigarette or cigar or a pipe doesn't get filtered out at all. So the concentrations of carcinogens, nicotine, and tar are much higher. So for this reason, side stream smoke is more dangerous than mainstream smoke. One of the biggest concerns with tobacco and e-cigarette use is their potential to lead to addiction. One of the reasons nicotine can lead to addiction is because of the feel-good effect. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that carries the feel-good messages that cause this effect. We release dopamine naturally when we do something that gives us pleasure, such as eating good food. However, when a person uses a product that contains nicotine, it also causes the brain to release dopamine into the reward circuit, and therefore the feel-good effect occurs. This feel-good effect wears off quickly, causing people who use products with nicotine, such as cigarettes and e-cigarettes, to want them to use them again. This is what can lead a casual smoker or vaping hobby to an addiction. Symptoms of nicotine addiction include not being able to stop using cigarettes or e-cigarettes, the occurrence of withdrawal symptoms if an individual tries to stop, continuing to use tobacco products or e-cigarettes, even though an individual is experiencing health problems, like smoker's cough, and giving up social or recreational activities in order to smoke or vape. Becoming nicotine dependent is a high concern for teenagers because the brain is still developing until about age 25. When the developing teenage brain is exposed to an addictive substance such as nicotine, it permanently changes how the brain develops. This means a person can have problems with learning, attention, memory, and thinking later in life. It also makes a person more vulnerable to developing other addictions in the future. The more a person uses e-cigarettes or cigarettes, the more the brain and body gets used to having nicotine in its system. This makes it very hard for the body to go without nicotine. If a person stops using products that contain nicotine, like e-cigarettes, they will experience withdrawal symptoms. Symptoms of nicotine withdrawal include feeling irritable, restless, or jittery, headaches, an increase in sweating, feeling sad or anxious, feeling tired or groggy, having trouble thinking clearly or concentrating, having trouble sleeping, feeling hungry, and having intense cravings for tobacco or e-cigarette products. If you've been paying attention to the news, you've probably noticed that e-cigarette use is becoming more and more of a problem among teenagers. This is partly not their fault, as the e-cigarette industry has been directly targeting them for years. Today, e-cigarettes are now the most commonly used tobacco product among youth. In 2017, 2.1 million students used e-cigarettes compared to 1.4 million who used cigarettes. In the U.S., youth are more likely to use e-cigarettes than adults. As you can see in the pictured graph, according to the 2018 National Youth Tobacco Survey, e-cigarette use among middle and high school students increased sharply between 2017 and 2018. The survey also found over 3.6 million kids are currently using e-cigarettes. In addition, over the course of 1 year, the survey found a 78% increase in e-cigarette use among high school students and a 48% increase among middle school students. If we look at the data from the last Minnesota student survey, e-cigarette use in Minnesota also follows the national trends. This increase is due to a number of different reasons, including the ease of availability of e-cigarettes, the belief that e-cigarettes are safer than regular cigarettes, the various e-liquid flavors, and alluring advertisements. In fact, 68% of high school students used flavored e-cigarettes in 2018, up from 61% in 2017. So why do e-cigarette companies target teenagers to use their products? To understand this, let's think about the history of the tobacco companies. When people think about smoking, they often think of it as an adult problem. However, the fact of the matter is 9 out of 10 cigarette smokers start before the age of 18. Smoking is very much a youth problem, and evidence has shown that the tobacco industry has been targeting young people for decades. Just as with the tobacco companies, the earlier they can hook a new user, the bigger profit they will make, since only 1 in 14 smokers will quit before adulthood. If you look at recent advertisements for e-cigarettes, it's clear who these companies are targeting. For example, can you think of who would be attracted to this jewel print ad? Now that we have established why e-cigarette companies are targeting young adults to purchase their nicotine products, let's discuss how they target them. E-cigarette companies use 4 specific tactics to reach teenagers. They do this by offering appealing flavors, creating advertising campaigns for social media outlets, offering scholarships to teenagers, and sponsoring popular music festivals and events. Let's start with flavorings. Flavors are one method e-cigarette companies are using to market their products to teenagers. Currently, there are over 15,500 flavors available on the market, and this number is only growing. E-cigarette companies use this tactic because they know it works. We can see this through the history of the tobacco companies. In 2009, the Family and Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act banned flavors in regular cigarettes, excluding menthol, because research shows they are more appealing to young people. In fact, a study that included middle and high school students found that 43% of young people who ever used e-cigarettes tried them because of appealing flavors. Another way e-cigarette companies are targeting young adults is through advertising. Youth and young adults are often exposed to e-cigarette advertising and have high awareness of them. According to truthinitiative.org, by 2016, nearly 4 out of 5 middle and high school students, or more than 20 million youth, saw at least one e-cigarette advertisement. In addition to using retail stores, television, and magazines and newspapers to advertise their products, e-cigarette companies also rely heavily on social media to stir up buzz. As their products become more popular, the likelihood they will appear on timelines and news feeds more often increases as well. Let's explore how effective this tactic is by using Juul as an example. Most recently, Juul has relied on social media to promote its products. In 2015, Juul spent more than $1 million to promote their products on the internet. Since then, the brand has paid for advertising campaigns to appear on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. All of these campaigns focused heavily on associating Juul with being cool, having fun, relaxation, freedom, and sex appeal. Since 2015, studies done on Juul advertising have found that Juul retail sales highly correlated with social media growth, specifically the number of Juul-related tweets. In fact, Juul retail sales and social media growth matched up so well that the number of Juul-related tweets had skyrocketed from a monthly average of 765 in 2015 to 30,565 in 2017. By the end of 2017, Juul had captured more than half of the entire e-cigarette market share. Today, Juul is the most popular e-cigarette brand among young people. In fact, e-cigarette companies often recycle old marketing tactics that have been successful in the past. This can easily be seen when comparing e-cigarette and cigarette print ads. Can you spot the similarities? Due to the sharp increase of e-cigarette use among teens and young adults as a result of some of these marketing techniques, the Food and Drug Administration has started to take some action. On August 8, 2016, the following rules regarding e-cigarette sales were put in place by the FDA. Retail stores selling e-cigarettes and their components are now only allowed to sell e-cigarettes to customers who are of 18 years of age or older, and they must check a photo ID of anyone under the age of 27 who tries to purchase an e-cigarette. The rules also made it illegal to give away free samples of e-cigarettes or their components, or sell them in a vending machine unless the machine is located in an adult-only venue. While these restrictions helped, e-cigarette use among teens continues to grow. So, the FDA created more restrictions that began on June 11, 2018. These rules stipulated that all e-cigarettes and advertisements for e-cigarettes are required to have a nicotine addictiveness warning statement on them. The FDA is also currently discussing regulations on e-cigarette flavorings, as well as tightening the reins on products that are marketed or appealing to youth in an effort to combat the rising usage of e-cigarettes. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2016, the FDA stipulated that they had to approve all e-cigarette products. However, they gave the e-cigarette companies until 2020 to prepare their products for the approval process, while at the same time allowing them to sell their products on shelves. Well, it's 2020 now, and the FDA has tried to extend that deadline for e-cigarette companies while still allowing them to sell their products on their shelves. Since the start of 2020, no information has come out about what this approval process will look like and what the deadlines are for e-cigarette companies. In addition, the Trump administration has been looking at legislation that would ban flavored e-cigarette products in the United States. However, they have yet to enact any such law. Quitting the use of tobacco or e-cigarettes is very hard. The difficulty people face when quitting smoking proves how extremely addictive nicotine is. However, 90% of smokers in the U.S. who quit do so without the benefit of any formal treatment program. In addition, most withdrawal symptoms disappear and the body begins to repair itself within 2 weeks of quitting. Breathing becomes easier, smoker's cough is less frequent, and sense of taste and smell improve. 70% of smokers say they want to quit. However, most people require an average of 5 to 7 attempts to quit before they are actually successful. One reason people have trouble overcoming tobacco and e-cigarette dependency is that many activities trigger smoking. People are cued into smoking or vaping when waking up, having a cup of coffee, finishing a meal, talking on the phone, driving a car, or drinking alcohol. We also have several treatments that can help wean someone off nicotine. There are nicotine patches, which is an adhesive patch that goes on the skin and allows a smaller dose of nicotine to be absorbed through the skin over a 24-hour period of time. We also have nicotine gum and lozenges, which allow, again, a smaller dose of nicotine to be absorbed through the mucous membranes of the mouth. So someone can slowly wean themselves off of the effects of nicotine and not experience those withdrawal symptoms. We also have some drug therapies to help with nicotine addiction. One such drug is Chantix. You might have seen commercials for this on TV, but that one is actually pretty successful that we have. So we do have some assistance when trying to quit smoking on our own. The best way a person can prevent the health effects and addiction of nicotine use is by not trying it in the first place. However, if a person needs help quitting, dealing with nicotine withdrawal symptoms, or if they're having feelings of extreme sadness or depression, don't ignore it. They should talk to a doctor, school nurse, or another healthcare professional that can help.